Hi guys, you are probably aware that there is some new content that has been dropped 1.2 ZenlessZoneZero, and with it we've been introduced to a new Shiyu defense that has plenty of and a lot of different combat challenges as well. And the new thing that I'm going to be talking about today is a guide regarding the ambush node, the first frontier. This is pretty standard as far as Shiyu defenses go. It has a special effect like defensive assist days increases by 100%. In this case, for instance, it would make sense to pick someone that has great defensive assist or is going to be using their defensive assist a lot rather. That includes characters like Seth. That'll probably also include a character like Caesar if you're someone that's also playing them, but can even include some characters that you may not necessarily have to pull for, including someone like Lucy. This content is similar to Disputed Node in the sense that this is once again another boss focused or a multi-boss kind of encounter, and honestly pretty cool. In terms of what the actual content has to offer, we've got new monsters, Frenzied Maniac, Wicked Wraith, but we also have some recurring figures including the Enforcers, which are all standard. For these initial two stages, there isn't much to say here. Basically, matching up your enemy weakness and avoiding resistances is going to be key when it comes to clearing this content, and that makes sense because obviously you want the 20% increase to damage, anomaly application, anomaly damage, whatever the case is. One thing I would like to suggest, and if you are someone that is going to be trying to do the ambush nodes, is that although it is important for you to take in mind what the element weaknesses are for each fight, what's more important than hitting the enemy weakness is avoiding the enemy resistance. Now, as you see on screen right here, I didn't end up using specifically a fire or soldier 11 character to try and fight this first boss. What I instead tried to do was use specifically someone that avoided or didn't have any electric in their kit. But for the first ambush node, the defensive assist thing is kind of a non-factor. Yes, it does increase the amount of days that you do, and yes, the follow-up damage increases by 100%, but this is basically saying, okay, you'll stun a little bit faster in a mode that doesn't have any time requirements anyways, so feels a little bit pointless. But I ended up using two characters or two team compositions that have the defensive assist heavy characters in it. That included my Lycon Sokaku team with Korin, and that included my Seth and Caesar team. By the way, in case you're curious, Caesar is amazing.
My wife.
Next, stage 2. Now, stage 2 does kind of make sense for having a dodge counter increase damage, since they do have things like this new dog. It's basically the same thing, or the same as the old dog, but has recoloring. It does look pretty cool, but in general, between that and these two mechas that have obviously a weakness towards electricity, there isn't much to note here. If you are curious about Node 2 specifically, it is worth mentioning that I believe it's the Heavy Striker here, or it might be both, are actually unable to be stunned or dealt damage to unless if you specifically stun them, or if you decide to, I guess, apply weakness or specifically shock them using an anomaly. So if that's the case, the biggest thing for you to focus on when it comes to beating up this stage is going to be getting out a stunner so that you can get rid of the barrier and stun in chain attack and beat up the boss. The dog here is you kind of walk it and you just beat the hell out of it, and it is what it is. Nothing really special about here. It's pretty much just the dog and just dodge and beat it. So cool. Okay, but now you're probably wondering to yourself at this point, Connor, the first two stages, they don't really matter. Dodge counter damage increase, but it doesn't really matter. You can clear everything, no problem. Well then, like, who cares? This content has got to be easy, right? Wrong. So first and foremost, you might be familiar with this combo if you're familiar. Now the thing is, this is fine, but for a lot of players, this is actually one of the more annoying combos, specifically because they hit you, they bash you. It feels like as you're trying to beat up one of the enemies, the other is shooting you in the back. What I have found to be the most effective for this specifically is honestly just getting rid of the big bulky enemy and ignore the Thanatos until you can make it a 1v1. But as always, in terms of what characters you have access to, your best bet here is going to be using Ellen if you have her, or Jiyuan if you have her as well. I understand that at the same time, telling people to use 2 limited DPS to beat this doesn't really make sense. I ended up using Korin, and well, with enough investment and having Sokaku Lycon specifically, it felt fine. Having to fight these characters usually means that using defensive assist characters like Ambi or stunners in general, characters that have defensive assists, makes this much easier so that you can stun them and make them stop moving and they just blow up and die anyways. If you don't have this option, I would definitely recommend trying to apply Disorder as quick as possible, although it's a little bit dicey since Thanatos moves around a lot. For your second team here, it's Guardian Mark III, and personally, I've never had too much trouble with these characters because their whole attack pattern is super linear and super straightforward. They don't deviate, it's just a big robot. So if you want to use someone like Anton, if you want to use any electricity character, or pair someone like Ambi to try and stun the robot quicker, that's a great idea. In most cases, this won't be that much of a problem though. And if you are someone that has any of the other limited characters I talked about previously, well, let's just be clear, guys, Jane is going to one-shot it anyways. Here's where it gets interesting. You guys have probably thought to yourself, all right, Connor, yeah, but ZenlessZoneZero is out of options. Yeah, just another disputed node. No, actually, no. Because they decided to add back Doppelganger Jane. So this is the Shadow Jane that we fought in the story. Spoilers, I apologize if you haven't gotten to this point, but it's been roughly a month. The thing that's really interesting about this fight, to put it bluntly, is that she moves around super fast. She is very much the striking image of what playing Jane herself looks like. Truth be told, if I wasn't playing Jane, I'd probably be getting run over. Now, if you do have mitigators like someone like Caesar, or if you're able to stun Jane with a stunner or any character in general, it'll probably feel a little bit better. But her attacks looked like they hurt a lot, and she was really fast. She was a little creepy, to be honest. In terms of this, if you do have access to, again, a character like Piper, you may be tempted to use her to, again, deal with the Jane. But keep in mind that a Piper team fighting against Jane will probably have to deal with Jane moving around a lot. And if you've ever tried playing Piper against a character like Thanatos or anyone that teleports, this is a lot worse than you actually think. The enemies move around a lot and it feels really annoying, and then you feel like you're hitting nothing because they're dashing or teleporting and you're basically wasting your energy. So keep that in mind when you're trying to, or if you decide to use physical weakness against Jane. Otherwise, what I do think could actually be helpful is, again, just using a stunner. Hopefully not, you know, an Ellen team, since you're weak to ice in this case, but Anby, Lucy, any combination of that should be fine, especially since the character does a lot of melee attacks and you should be able to stun them decently quickly. Now, that you might have thought at this point that this was the highlight of the stage. You might have thought that this is amazing. And even if you take a look at the special effect from this node, it says that when you trigger a perfect dodge, the agent damage increases by 10%. Damage received is reduced by 10% for 10 seconds, up to 3 times. Now, this is obviously supposed to tell you or indicate that, well, hey, you know, we've got Shadow Jane, just fight with Shadow Jane. And that's the whole highlight of the stage. But if you decide to pass over the first stage, you're in for a rude awakening, because it's 2 Thanatoses. And believe it or not, 2 Thanatoses is worse than 1 Thanatos, obviously, but it sounds, it's actually much worse than you think it is. Thanatos by himself already teleports a lot. He's annoying, and if you're someone that wants to use Grace or any anomaly-based character, well, you're kind of out of luck. A lot of teleporting makes this boss basically or shake off any kind of debuff pretty easily, and in most cases, your stun duration is super short. You could argue that this is a bit of a cop-out because Thanatos is obviously really OP and putting 2 of them is obviously more difficult than 1. But I will say I was able to clear it with Corrin. It did take me a couple tries, but Ice, of course, is going to be your best play here, since not only does it stun or technically interrupt the enemy and freeze them in place, it also deals decent damage because of the weakness. Now, I would definitely recommend trying to take a hyper carry, or a more melee focus on field demanding hyper carry if you're trying to fight against a character like Thanatos, especially because performing defensive assists really stacks up or begins to build up their days gauge. But that's not even the craziest stage that we have, because we have to talk about the 5th and final stage for the Shiyu node. Now, you might have noticed something at this point. Yes, we have an annoying brute on the side here. Both these enemies are weak to physical, which is great if you guys have decided to pull for Jane, or if you ended up building Piper, or both. You'll also notice that there is a big weakness or a change in resistance now to GUN and Ellen teams. In most cases, if you don't have Jane, you're in for a treat, because now you're gonna have to use Soldier 11, you're gonna have to use Piper, or you're gonna have to use Yakamata. This looks pretty normal and looks very unassuming until you click in and you realize that there is another that's now a shadow figure. For the most part, I had kind of already assumed from my fight, or based on my fight with Jane, that what's the worst that could happen? Jane's probably the worst character that you could see, but this character is kind of annoying, and I'll be honest with you, this is one of the hardest characters that we've definitely encountered in terms of mechanics, but the fight itself is not too insane, obviously, because you have things like weakness, or you can stun the enemy. But let me explain. The Typhon Challenger by themselves is already an annoying big brute that punches at you, tries to beat your head in and knock you over and interrupt you. But this doppelganger for Pulchra, who's a character I believe that has been teased, she's the fox lady, I believe, that has been teased from the trailers. She shoots you and she also dodges. Now, this sounds very unassuming. Again, this doesn't sound like that big a deal until you realize that the bullets can do up to a quarter of your health and you can't dodge them. She literally shoots at you, and similar to, you know, like if a robot or one of the robots just shoots at you, like AI, like targeting, like you can't dodge it, kind of shooting at you, you just instantly take damage. If you don't have a barrier, sorry to say it, you're losing your total HP pool here. If it was just that, all right, well, just go after her and just beat her up. And for the most part, that is the strategy until you realize that she has a blue state that she has where she specifically dodges. And I'm not talking about like dodges one hit. I'm saying every time you hit, she like Naruto, like shadow clone dodges around you like a ninja and literally wastes your time. Now, fortunately, this is not that long of an attack and she does eventually go into a red state and prevents you from getting hit. However, this is actually really annoying, especially when you're trying to avoid the Typhon Challenger and Pulchra at the same time. For mobile frogs, or for PC frogs, I should say, or PC players, this is probably not that big a deal. Okay, you could probably get this over with in less than 30 minutes to maybe an hour's worth of trying. If you're a mobile player, good luck, sir. You might be thinking to yourself, all right, well, Pulchra has got to be the end-all be-all. She's not, because now what we have is Troublemaker, Wanted Enforcer, and we have Moors. Now, I have to admit here, in terms of fighting the second stage, in my experience, there's always at least one stage that will be a little bit easier than the other, simply because one of your teams will be way better built, and you have characters that you actually want to use to fight these characters. For me specifically, what I ended up using was I ended up using my Jane specifically to fight the second stage, and this went over in literally 5 seconds. All I had to do was just do a bunch of defensive assists, and by the time I opened my eyes or even paid attention to what I was doing, they were gone. In terms of what I saw Moors specifically doing though, he's another melee character and kind of accentuates the whole defensive assist, dodge counter that you would expect to have to do against an enforcer. But unlike Razor, who's the biggest of the enforcers and the most annoying of the enforcers, this specifically felt like more of a cakewalk because, you know, he's not doing some weird annoying animation where he like slings over to the side and he has weird timing and fast like bashes. At most you get punched. And that is kind of concerning, but no more annoying than any of the other characters or any of the encounters that I mentioned earlier. Now, in terms of what the special effect is specifically for this node as well, you'll notice that it's increased anomaly, build-up rate by 30%, and enemies afflicted with attribute anomaly deal 25% less damage for 10 seconds. They knew that Razor was a piece of crap, guys. Obviously, they want you to at least apply a little bit of anomaly through one of the teams. And if you have someone like Piper, well, that's one team set aside. Personally, I think it might be easier if you put Pulchra in specifically for that. For me specifically, it took me using Corrin, Chingy, and Nicole for me to even do a minor amount of damage to this first team. And it was still a pretty difficult fight, again, because I was kind of just getting shot in the head from behind. That being said, guys, my recommendations for this set of stages, kind of similar to the last one, is always try to get the defensive assist, the melee defensive assist when possible, as opposed to the evasive. If possible, try to abide by the anomaly since there's obviously an increased buildup rate of it, in addition to the lessening of damage taken when you do apply anomalies to them. But in my experience, a lot of players didn't end up building anomaly characters outside of the one Jane team. If I were to suggest splitting up one team to actually get the anomaly character as opposed to the other, I would definitely recommend fight Pulchra with the anomaly as opposed to the enforcer. The enforcer for me was just like a dodge counter fest, and okay, that's fine. Anyways, guys, a pretty quick overview of the ambush node. Again, it gives you a decent amount of rewards. I think it was pretty fun. They're not super high leveled, and if you're someone that's playing way later into the game, probably someone like Chingy and Nicole alongside Juyuan will beat up some of the stages, but they also had some resistances for this, so just keep that in mind when you're setting up or trying to find out which team you want to run into. But you could use Juyuan on the right side. I was going to say, and maybe use Ellen on the left if you have her. Yeah, these were the teams I used. These were recommendations. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this Shiyu guide. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you guys learned something. If you did, make sure to like, comment, turn on the notification bell, and subscribe. As a small reminder as well, in case you guys didn't know, first off, you, as far as I could tell, don't need to do the new 1.2 story to unlock this, but you probably have a level requirement to even unlock this to see Shiyu. However, as you see on the left side over there, it says time until end of operation, 42 days. So presumably this will reset at some point, which is really cool. It's a nice piece of content, and I'm very happy with it. Anyways, guys, that's going to be it for this video. I will see you all in the next one. Stay safe, stay healthy. Good night. Bye-bye.